차렷 경례.
Good morning, John.
Okay, good morning, Peter. So what do we got today?
Post-closing occupancy, John.
Okay.
Probably the worst part of our real estate contract, I have to say. We should at all costs try to avoid post-closing occupancy, but if you are in a position where you do need it, because a lot of people are doing move-ups and it is difficult to find a home, so we should dive into this contract and tell our associates what we have to watch out for.
Okay, so associates, here we go. So we're just gonna go right in to CTME and we're gonna find post-closing occupancy agreement right here. So let's go ahead and create one so we will know what we're doing. So here, you're the seller. I'm sorry. And then I'm going to be the buyer, John Park. Okay, I'm buying Arapahoe County. Okay. All right, so we got this house. We got under contract, let's say today. And yeah, let's talk about this agreement, post-closing occupancy agreement. When do we use this form?
Okay, so probably the most important thing in the post-closing occupancy agreement, John, is the first sentence. This cannot be used for a term longer than 60 days. So this must be used for post-closing occupancy 60 days or less. So be very cognizant of that. That is a big deal. This is a one-page lease that's poorly written. Just to give you an example, my lease is 18 pages long. We'll go over that a little bit later in this class. So anything less than 60 days, very, very important for you to remember that.
Perfect. Okay, so this is in like right now, seller's market. Every seller has all the advantage right now in our market. So seller is saying, you know what, I'll sell the house to you, but I want to stay maybe 45 days after closing so I could get ready and buy my next house and move into it and et cetera, et cetera. So now the buyers a lot of times have to give in, saying, you know what, if I want the house, I'm going to have to do this. So we don't like to use this form, but in those situations when it's, they're renting it back for even 1 day or 10 days or 40 days or 60 days or 59 days, I should say, we use this form. So let's go to next one. So buyer and seller number 2 enter this, okay, contract today. And then let's jump to number 3.
Well, real quick before you jump to number 3, the last sentence is also important in number 2. Basically just stating that if a closing does not occur, this contract shall terminate. So there is no lease agreement, so to speak, if the closing doesn't take place.
Got you. Okay. So let's go to number 3. Seller shall remain possession of the property from the date of closing till, how long do we want to set this one for?
Let's write it for 30 days, John.
Okay, 30 days. Okay, 30 days after closing, not to exceed 60 days provided. So there's about 5-day written notice to the buyer. They could terminate earlier, right? If they vacate early. Okay, but the notice must be given to the buyer 5 days prior to that date. So there's that language in there. So if this cannot be transfer assigned to somebody else, hey, I want to put some, instead of me, I want to put another person in there to stay. So this has to be between the buyer and seller. Anything you want to cover on that, or you want to cover anything more on number 3, paragraph 3?
I mean, I think you touched on some good things. Absolutely in no case is it okay to sublet this property. This lease does not allow you to do that. It is specifically between buyer and seller. Another thing is you as the buyer have to understand that you are now a landlord, whether you like it or not. That seller has now become a tenant, and that seller has tenant rights, and you follow the landlord rules in the county that you're in. So this 5-day notice is a little bit different in most cases. If it's a month-to-month tenancy, everything's done in a 30-day notice period of time. So
Gotcha.
this does accelerate that because the term of this lease, again, is less than 60 days. Okay. So those are just some of the things that I would touch on.
Sure. How about number 4? During the term, seller, at seller's own expense, will have to keep the improvements inside the house, personal property, everything in the same condition. Okay, repair, normal wear and tear accepted, but otherwise everything should be in the same condition. Anything you want to cover this? about
You
this?
know, the one thing that I run into here is usually in the fall, we just went through that season where you'll get into post occupancy. Make sure that that seller is blowing out the sprinkler lines, cleaning out the clogged gutters, those types of things. That's usually what I see there.
Okay. All right, let's jump to number 5. If necessary, buyer will, at buyer's sole expense, maintain, repair, and replace the heating and cooling systems. Buyers don't read this. So you want to cover this a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So a good example of this, John, is let's say you do your home inspection. Furnace
Uh-huh.
is 20 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and you ask the seller to replace the furnace.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the seller says, I'm not going to replace the furnace, John, but I'll give you a seller concession of $2,500.
Got you.
And you're in a post occupancy agreement, right? And
Yes.
November hits, and you
Mm-hmm.
get that first freeze. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that furnace that you got a $2,500 credit for all of a sudden doesn't work.
Uh, that's
And
why
now
we
you've
buy
got a
home
seller.
warranty.
Yep, that's why you bought the home warranty, right? Hopefully you did, and then you
Yeah.
can file the claim. But in that example, you as the buyer need to get that furnace up and running and or replace that furnace.
So,
And if you spent all your money in a seller concession to close on this house, you could be in a bad position as a buyer if you can't
right.
afford to do these things.
Yeah. So, I'm making a habit for me to buy home warranty for all my buyers, every single transaction. Uh, but then I think, especially if you guys are doing any post occupancy, post closing occupancy, I think you got to really think about getting the home warranty done in place for situations like this.
And that's a great suggestion, especially like let's say you've got an FHA borrower or a
Hmm.
VA borrower. They don't have a lot of money, $2,500 out of their pocket while they're moving. That's a
Hmm.
big deal to your buyer. So just be cognizant of that. It's never a bad idea to have a home warranty. A home warranty is basically going to cover anything that's a 505 rule. 505 rules are the rules set by our state of how we as landlords have to maintain a property. And if something in that 505 rule goes bad, we only have 48 hours to respond to it. And remember, buyers and sellers, you are now tenants and landlords. Okay. It is not the seller's house anymore. It is now that buyer's house, and that buyer is a landlord for this period of time.
Right. So let's go jump to number 6. Upon less than 24 hours prior notice to seller, buyer will have access. Okay, that's reasonable. They could go into the property, right?
They have a demand right to demand enter. Um, I've seen this grossly overused before, and it
Hmm.
becomes an uncomfortable situation. So know your clients before you get them into post occupancy agreements
Right.
and
Well,
what they're
if
going to do.
if they're like, well, I want to go look at the house 10 o'clock tomorrow night, that becomes
Yeah,
an
that's
issue.
unreasonable, but it does become an issue, and I've seen that become an issue. So just coach your people through it. Hey,
Okay.
you know what? They're going to be there for a while.
Hmm.
You don't need to enter the property on a regular basis.
All right. How about number 7, paragraph 7? Buyer has
Oh,
the right, not the obligation, to restore the property, any items of personal property owned by buyer to the same condition of repair and cleanliness as existed at the date of this agreement. Okay. Excluding no more. Anything here that you want to touch on?
not particularly.
Hmm.
I can't say I've ever seen this paragraph go into any kind of argument. So
Yeah, I think this is, you know, because when you buy a house, okay, you got real estate. You have real estate, but you also have personal property. So now at the time of closing, which is today, all the personal property inside that house they're still there is really, that's very confusing. So is that seller's property? Is that buyer's property? Of course, it's the seller's personal property, but there's some items that you negotiated on the contract that are like personal property, but then you're going to have ownership of that as a buyer. So I think that's what this is kind of touching
John,
on. Yes. Can you hear me?
did I lose you, John?
Uh-oh, that's not good.
John,
Uh, I'm
are you
here.
there?
I am here.
Okay, I got you again. Sorry,
Okay.
I
Sorry
lost you
about
there.
that, guys. We'll have to edit
Yeah,
that
sorry.
portion.
We'll keep going there.
Yes. So number
So
7. So yeah, in any time we do this, there's gonna be some gray area for personal property. So just make sure you're covering that with both your buyer and seller. Okay,
one thing I
number.
can just comment on that one thing is coach your buyers. You do not bring stuff to that home until that seller's out of that home completely.
Yes.
None of this, well, I'm just going to load up the garage with my stuff. That
No.
becomes very, very ugly. make sure
Mhm.
you have full possession before your buyer moves their stuff in.
So here we go. You guys are now landlords and tenants. You need to negotiate how much money.
How much money per day? Yes.
Yes.
A
So,
lot of times, what I'll do here, John, is I'll
mhm.
just kind of take what your mortgage would be
Okay.
on a monthly basis and divide that into 30. That just
Hmm.
makes it nice and clean. If you do want to make money on it, then you can, pursue it for higher. It's not uncommon right now when you're up against 15 offers to win one of these properties that you might actually be giving post occupancy for free.
There we go. 0 per day. Yeah.
And a lot of times when I'm in the seller's position, I'm negotiating for free post occupancy for
Hmm.
about 30 days. Most buyers in this market will be doing that.
Okay, so we leave it at 0. Hey, good deal for the seller. Okay.
Yeah,
So should seller vacate before the end of the term, the earner rent. So this is not
not for
gonna,
zero, but let's say it's
yeah, so
$150.
let's go back to 150. Let's say that's what's negotiated. So should seller vacate before the end of the term, the earner rent will or will not be refunded. So most of the times I think I see will here.
I see will typically, especially if
Hmm.
there's a dollar amount associated with the rent.
Hmm.
Obviously, if it's probably be will not.
Hmm.
You also have to remember that this $150 a day for 30 days will be paid to the buyer at the time of closing. So it's actually going to be a line item in your settlement statement. So all of that is settled. It's not like you go day by day and give this guy $150 and
Hmm.
or finish your term of your lease and then write a check. All of that's prorated at the closing table.
Hmm.
So if you are marking the box will, here's another thing. Make sure that your buyer has the ability to pay that back
Hmm.
and he doesn't spend it all because he spent it all on closing or he spent it in moving. This is where
That's
I
right.
see arguments between
Hmm.
buyers and sellers is this in this point and another point a little bit further down section 15 and the damage deposit. We'll cover that when we get to that section.
Yes.
So
Okay. All right. How about number 9? So this is pretty much we're gonna seller agrees to abide by all the rules.
yeah, so they're not going to do
Hmm.
anything criminal in your
Yeah.
home or hazardous to the property.
Okay. Number 10.
So number 10 is basically the fee if the seller
Hmm.
doesn't vacate that property. And you want this to be a pretty hefty fee, in my opinion.
So
I see John put in there $150. I usually go as high as $500 per day. The reason I do this is I want to set a point, get the heck out of my house. If this
gotcha.
fee is not big enough for them to
Hmm.
be motivated to get out of your home,
Hmm.
they might stay there a lot longer than you want them to.
Okay. Let's go to number 11. Water and sewer. Who pays for that?
So typically, I'll see a buyer pay for it because now that water and sewer has been prorated and moved over to the buyer's side of things.
Hmm.
Um, if you do have the seller pay for that, you have to get the final water read from the time that the seller moves out, and
Hmm.
that usually takes some time. That's not usually quick and instantaneous, unlike your utility bill on electric and gas, which is the next section over. It's really easy to contact Excel Energy and switch service from a specific date. It becomes a little bit more cumbersome on the water and especially on a sewer, right? Because there's an annual sewer fee in most cities. So you're talking about prorating $250 over the period of 30 days, which can be kind of cumbersome math wise. So I typically have the buyer pay for water and sewer since that's switched over, and then I'll have the seller pay their electric and gas.
So that's what I've seen maybe 95% of the times. But I do sometimes see seller because the buyer is saying, well, that's not my water. Seller is using the water, so seller should pay for that. So I think then you're kind of like honoring each other, hopefully, and there's some kind of honor system that we'll look at the prior month's water bill and sewer bill and we'll prorate it or something like that. So that's another agreement that should be done between the buyer and the seller. Now the tenant and the landlord, I actually do prefer it being the buyer. Just make that part of your thing, you
And
know.
just know that if that
Hmm.
is seller,
Hmm.
you're going to want to reach out to the water company and make sure
Yes.
that they do a final water read on the day of the move out.
Yeah.
That's an extra step that you're going to have to take if that is
Yeah.
marked as seller, so that you guys don't have any discrepancies on any prorations.
At this one, next one, like you were talking about, most of the time is definitely going to be the seller.
Correct, and it's pretty easy to
Hmm.
switch your typical utility company. That's
Hmm.
not as complicated as the water or sewer charge proration.
All right, number 13, seller will or will not maintain and pay for the costs of seller's renter's policy. Very important. I see a lot of realtors just clicking on will not. They don't think twice. They just click on will not. Will not. I mean, they have insurance, they have homeowners insurance, but I think Pete's gonna say, I would actually would like to see will. What do you think?
I'm 100% on will.
Yes.
A renter's policy is not very expensive.
Yes.
This is anywhere from $50 to $200 for the entire year. And this is going to cover all of the personal property. Not
Hmm.
only is it going to cover their personal property, but let's take the case of I
A
remember I had
friend.
a property not so
Uh-huh.
long ago, and the day that they were moving, they
Hmm.
put a cardboard box on the stove. Well,
Hmm.
their 3-year-old daughter turned the stove on, and that box caught on fire, and that
Hmm.
caused a lot of damage to that home. So any type of replacement for personal property, as well as if there's a fire or something like that in the home, this will actually put those sellers up in a hotel room,
Yes.
not the homeowner's policy for the buyer. Okay,
Yes.
that's going to be a very different type of coverage. So it is
Hmm.
important that that seller has a renter's policy, in my opinion.
Right. So the rebuttal I hear from other realtors is, well, seller has homeowners insurance. We will just keep it during this 30-day period. We won't cancel that seller's homeowner insurance, but that's a different kind of policy. So you're at the day of closing now, you're becoming a tenant. So I think Pete's right. We probably should get seller to get the renter's policy, which is very cheap. The problem is they think it's really expensive, is where a lot of pushback comes from. It's like, well, that's too much money. But yeah, we had to educate the sellers. Hey, it's not that much money. Call your insurance agent. Just change it over to renter's policy. Um, and how about, if you don't do that and then, you invite friends over and they have a huge party and a chandelier falls on their head and kills one of them. So you got some issues. I mean,
It's quite the example there, John. Yes,
yeah,
you would definitely have a few issues there.
yeah.
I like your extreme examples.
Okay. All right, let's go to number two, 13, number two. So will or will not maintain and pay for adequate liability insurance? Okay, so what do you think?
I mark will on both of the insurance paragraphs. In this period of time,
Mm-hmm.
you've got one of the important things I'd actually like to mention there
Mm-hmm.
is when the buyer is buying a regular homeowner's policy, they're
Mm-hmm.
buying that homeowner's policy for themselves. There's a
Yes.
lot of insurance companies that exclude renters in that policy.
Yes.
So it is important if you're tying up your client in a post occupancy contract, even at the beginning of your contract, they need to be in touch with their insurance agent and explain to them that they're going to be a landlord for 60 days. They need to have a different type of policy that then either needs to cover them for that 60-day period of time as a landlord, make sure it's not excluded because most homeowners policy will exclude tenant use. You have to change it over to a landlord policy. So I
Awesome.
think that's probably one of the more important things that people don't do.
Yep. So 13, Pete and I agree. I think we like this. We're not attorneys, so we can't do legal advice,
Sure.
but this is what I prefer for our associates. Number 14, buyer agrees to maintain and pay for cost of homeowner. Yeah, that's absolutely. Okay, number 15, seller agrees to a security deposit. Here we go. Here's a
Oh,
biggie.
this is my favorite one, John. So, um, lots of problems with number 15. I've personally had some mediation over this particular paragraph, and this kind of goes back into the fact that a regular page is 18 page lease is 18 pages long, not 17 sections. So, if you put in a damage deposit, there's a couple of things here. Number
Mhm.
one, that damage deposit is not your buyer's money. Okay.
So we probably don't want to click this then.
Yes, that's actually kind of a bad idea. In fact, I have seen and been in a position where and I was on the selling side actually, but we
Hmm.
gave a buyer some damage deposit and they
Hmm.
spent it and they did not have the ability to pay it back. So that is not legal, people. In fact, if you are holding a damaged deposit, if you're a professional holding a damaged deposit, and especially if you're one of my realtors or your realtors, these deposits should be held in separate trust accounts, real
Thank
estate
you.
trust accounts by themselves. Okay. You could put trust account in there. You as the professional can hold the damage deposit as well. That's what I prefer to do. I do own a property management company. You need to talk to your managing agent if you're going to be holding any money for anybody, because they absolutely must be in trust accounts. Okay. This is not your money. This is money to be held in the event that the property is damaged.
So my associates, actually, I would like to keep it in my escrow account, my separate trust account for my brokerage at Liberty Associates. But what's the issue with title companies? Some realtors put in like land title. Some people will put equity title, not to advertise my title company. But what's the issue with title companies?
Well, one of the issues is they don't like escrowing things without charging you for them, so there may be a fee associated with some kind of escrow. And
Mhm,
B, you have to sign an escrow release by both parties.
mhm.
So if both parties don't agree with things, it's going to be a lot more difficult to get your money back from that title company, in my opinion.
This is a tough issue. So do we want security deposit or do we not want security deposit?
I honestly prefer not to, especially if I'm on the seller's side.
Mhm,
I'm going to prefer not to do a deposit. If I'm on the
mhm.
buying side, I am going to negotiate for a deposit.
Yeah, what
Um,
do you typically negotiate? How much money you think? Twice the
Typically, the
rent?
first month's rent,
First one. So let's
25,
say like 3,000 or something like that.
something along those lines. So it really depends on the side of the transaction I'm on. The other thing
So,
that people might have to understand as well, John,
mhm,
is you're a landlord, and when you're on the buying side and you have this $3,000 damage deposit, when that property is turned over to you,
mhm,
you have 30 days to give that back to them.
mhm,
So or give them notice of why you're not giving it back to them with invoices that go along with that notice.
mhm.
Okay, so you do have a certain amount of time that you have to respond to these people. You can't just hold on to this money for 6 months, because you can end up in mediation because of that.
Right. So what is the magic thing here? Number 15 is so hard for our associates. 3,000 held by Colorado Homes. What should I type here?
Colorado Home Sales Inc. And that's how I would want my associates to hold earnest money.
Yeah,
That is in separate trust accounts.
right.
Again, I am set up for that.
Well,
Not
I thought we're gonna take this money and go to Las Vegas, you and me.
Well, heck yeah. I mean, we're gonna find something wrong with that house when we get it.
But
Here's another
anyway, yeah, go ahead.
really, really important tip, John, on number 15. So, what I coach my clients to do, and it's not a bad thing to add to this, we'll go over that in my lease agreement, is you can have a move in, move out checklist. Okay. So, from the day of closing, fill out a move in, move out checklist. When that buyer goes to do a final walkthrough, whip out that checklist and go through the property and identify any issues, any cosmetic issues. Okay. Hey, the carpet is torn over here. Hey, there's a hole in the drywall over here. The second thing that I encourage my sellers to do and my buyers to do is take a video of the home the day of
I love
closing.
that. I love that.
Okay. Take a video and pictures of things that are damaged. Okay. Therefore, this will not be a discussion 2 months from now when you guys can't stand each other and you're arguing over that $3,000. And if you're in a mediation or a courtroom, you could whip out your cell phone video and say, this is what we're discussing, versus a bunch of he said, she said type of stuff.
I like that. I like that. What a great thing to do. Anything else?
And most agents, when you present that,
Hmm.
the other thing I would do is email it to the agent that
Hmm.
day.
Hmm.
So now you've got an email with a video that went through on a specific day. It's timestamped.
Hmm.
And then when you're moving out, it's not
Hmm.
a bad idea to then do another video.
So are you gonna email me a move in, move out checklist too, so I could have it in my files?
It's part of that 18-page lease agreement there, John, that we're
Oh,
going.
so I already have it. So I have all the good stuff. Okay. All right. Anything else should be covered? Number 16.
Number 16 just basically says that you guys are going to agree to go to mediation, not
Arbitration.
arbitration.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it does get
Mediation.
ugly. I have seen mediation before in this post
Mm-hmm.
occupancy agreement. Again,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a poor one pager. We're going to talk about what a real lease agreement looks like here in just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yes, that's basically all that covers.
Okay. So I think I'm just gonna call this the whole contract. I think we're good.
That sounds good. So again, we talked about this only
Mm-hmm.
being 17 sections long. I think this is a very poorly written lease agreement. Um,
Absolutely. I hate this form. I literally hate this form.
so by all means, if you can avoid
Mhm.
any post occupancy, please do so.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
if you are in a situation, like I have a situation right now where we ended up with a list pendants in a transaction, and now we're out 6 months on this deal. So
Mhm.
we agreed to do some type of long-term post-occupancy. This particular deal has been extended by 6 months.
Mm.
In this case, it is important that you do not use the post-occupancy agreement form. Okay, that's only a 60-day form. You need to actually go into a full-blown lease agreement. This lease agreement should be drafted by an attorney. Do not just Google it online. Okay.
Oh, shoot. I thought I could just type something up on my computer.
Yes, maybe LegalZoom, okay, if you want to be
Okay.
cheap. But I do
So,
retain an eviction attorney by the name of Paul Cheddar. He is the drafter and the individual that has drafted my lease agreement. John, I think I sent you a
yes.
copy of that. So if you
Should we
want to
share
pull that,
that?
yeah, let's
Okay.
share that just briefly.
All right. So let's go in and do you see that on your screen?
Okay, here we go. So
Okay.
as you can see, this is a little bit more detailed
Mm-hmm.
than the previous lease agreement. This covers move in, move out, rents, security deposits. Um, this agreement also extends my term to return a security deposit to 60 days
Mm-hmm.
versus 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
One of the main reasons for that is if a tenant causes significant damage to a property, I may
Right.
not know what the damages are in a 30-day
All right.
period of
Yep. So
time.
I see it here, 60 days. Yep, for
Right.
sure.
This addresses utilities in
Mm-hmm.
a lot of detail.
Mm-hmm.
This addresses late fees, penalties, and so
Mm-hmm.
forth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the unique things is with the post occupancy agreement, there's not a lot of late fees and penalties because all of it's settled at the closing table.
That's
So
correct.
everything's going to be prorated out. But if you're going past 60 days, you're not going to be able to settle a full, 6 or 12 month lease at the closing table. You do need to go to a
Mm-hmm.
written document.
Mm-hmm.
This also talks about reletting. This
Mm-hmm.
talks about defaults, abandonment. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of paragraphs in here. I'm not going to get into all of these in
Mm-hmm.
detail because I'm not an attorney.
Right.
And this was drafted by my legal counsel. So
Mm-hmm.
again, a very, very different type of agreement, a
Mm-hmm.
far more detailed agreement that
Yes.
addresses a lot of issues where the
Mm-hmm.
post occupancy agreement barely addresses who's going to pay for what.
Mm-hmm.
If you can continue scrolling through this, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't again want to get into a lease agreement. This is not a class on that.
No, we
Um,
don't have time for that.
yeah, right. I mean, this is like the size of a purchase contract. So if you keep going down a little bit further, John,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Tell me when.
there we go. So addendum B, move in, move
Okay.
out checklist.
Ah, there it is. Oh,
Again,
how lovely is that?
yes.
Yes.
So I do ask that my buyers and sellers fill this out. I
Mm-hmm.
have yet to have an agent that I presented the move in, move out checklist not agree that it's a wonderful idea
It's a great
because now
idea. It's a
you've got a
great,
written
great.
document that's been agreed to by buyers and sellers and usually a video of the day of closing. It just makes it that much easier and keeps the guessing of who did what kind of damage out of it.
Hey,
Very,
so
very important.
hey, this is for you. Make sure you're not smoking anything. I wouldn't be smoking, right?
Yeah, the drug free, crime free. You want to make sure that they're not smoking meth in your home while you're away.
Oh, wouldn't that be a nightmare?
It would be because
Oh my
I've been in a
gosh.
lot of those types of remediations, and that could be a big, big, big problem. But again, see, our lease agreements, we have a separate addendum for drugs. If you continue
Mm-hmm.
scrolling, we have addendum for mold.
Mm-hmm.
We also have an addendum for asbestos, for
Mm-hmm.
lead-based paint.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we are redundant of that, so none
Mm-hmm.
of that is
Oh
covered.
yeah, we don't even cover about pet during our post closing
Pets
occupancy
aren't covered
agreement.
either.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's the point I'm trying to make here is
Mm-hmm.
try to avoid that post occupancy. Anything over 60 days is going to require a comprehensive document like this one.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's also extensive paragraphs in the new leases, which I actually have to purchase, where there's
Mm-hmm.
additional paragraphs for COVID
Mm-hmm.
and how to deal with COVID situations. So be careful when you're in post occupancy. That's all.
Yeah, dude. So, man, I feel so bad for our associates being a new broker and learning all this stuff. And man, that don't they have a tough time? I mean, what do you think? New brokers. I mean, you got to give it to them. They're learning everything. There's so much to learn, you know.
There's a
What?
lot to learn, and just take it in steps and work closely with your managing agents. All of my
Yes.
agents will always have access to me except for Sundays.
Hmm.
And
Hey, and for my associates, if you have questions, always call Pete.
well, you know, my door is always open here, John. So
Pete's a better looking guy and he's smarter. So if you have questions, call Pete. What's your phone number, Pete, for our associates?
it's 720
Go, come on.
220 2059. You're
And
always
my
welcome to call me.
and I'm just kidding, but for Pete's associates, my phone number is 303-669-4664. And I'm available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days. Although I may not answer the phone, I'm
So you
available.
could call him on Sundays.
So, do we love our job or what? You and I
We do,
both.
John. Thank you for having me again in this
Yeah,
class. These are
you're
great.
amazing. Thank you for your knowledge and your share of your knowledge. And we'll log out here and have a wonderful 10 o'clock class. So, 차렷
Yes.
경례.